when Treasures from the Folk Den was so well received? Actually, I have a two-part question here. First of all, were you surprised from a musical standpoint that the response was so strong releasing traditional music? Question number one. Question number two, did you see the Grammy nomination and the generally positive response to that as either a great big thumbs up or a vindication of some sort that your approach was definitely the right way to go?
What was question number one again?
Question number one was, were you surprised by the positive response to the traditional music that you were releasing?
I was pleased with the positive response. I'm not sure I was surprised because it had Pete Seeger and Odetta and Josh White Jr. and Tommy Makem and all these wonderful folk artists. It had all the folk artists that I grew up listening to, Joan Baez and Judy Collins, and they were all on there. So I didn't really think it was about me. I thought it was, an album that was preserving the songs and the artists that I grew up listening to. And so I really wasn't surprised with the positive reaction because they're all wonderful artists and well received. They all have followings of their own. And then, but the Grammy nomination was a surprise. I was really happy about that.
The fact that you record, mix, and release this yourself, this is obviously a model that's worked for you, and I think it's pretty safe to say that you're a pioneer in this field and a highly visible, successful musician that's done all of this independently. You sort of serve as an example for other musicians. Would you ever consider doing a tutorial of any kind, or have you already done something like that to guide other musicians to follow in your footsteps?
I have a DVD called Roger McGuinn's How to Record on a Computer recording DVD from Homespun Tapes. And so that's a tutorial. It's a bit dated now. It doesn't have the latest equipment or software in it, but it might be time to do an updated one. But I'm very, very enthusiastic about it. I got into it back in 1991 when Terry Melcher called me and said, I'd like you to play on a Beach Boys album. And I flew out to California and went over to his house, and I expected he was going to take me down to the studio and we were going to start recording the Beach Boys album. But no, he had an early version of Pro Tools running in the living room and a couple of nice mics, and we did the Beach Boys album in his living room. And it was just a real eye-opener because up until that time, it took about $1 million to get all the gear together to make a decent album. The recording equipment was extremely expensive. I mean, a good Studer 24-track was, $30,000, $40,000. Like some of the expensive, more like the 64-track recorders were $250,000, and then the board was another couple of $100,000. And it was the kind of thing that made artists have to sign these terrible contracts with record companies so that the record companies who had all the money could afford to pay for the studio costs, because they were sometimes $1,000 a day or more. And you couldn't afford to record on your own. Well, with the advent of these, what they call a DAW, digital audio workstation, artists can do their own thing for under $2,000, usually a couple of $1,000. You got enough to, $1 million studio. I remember when I showed up at Pete Seeger's house with the recording gear, his wife Toshi said, wow, you got $1 million studio in a box. And I did. It was so cool.
Compare and contrast the sort of old school model of recording and releasing music to what you're doing now on your own.
Well, it's a lot better, what I'm doing now. For me, I don't really see going to the big studio unless I want to work with somebody else who's in one. But as far as the quality goes, it's, first of all, every CD you hear goes through a computer in the mastering stage. So you can't say computers and music don't mix. That's sort of a silly idea, that every CD is done on a computer. Then, laying down of basic tracks. Well, you've got all these tracks here. I've got 128 tracks in this program, and actually it's unlimited. This is a new version of Adobe Audition that will be released shortly, and I've been privileged to beta test it, and it's got unlimited tracks. It's just as many as your PC, which I built that from scratch, and it's a pretty powerful one, and it'll hold a lot of tracks. I've had up to 50 tracks going at the same time, and there's no reason to go to the studio. So we record here. It's not $1,000 a day. It's $0 a day, I can do it anytime I want. I can get up at 2 in the morning and start recording if I want to, or I can record anytime I want. It's right here all the time. I've got some really good microphones, and they're the most important element. The microphone is like the lens on a camera. It's the most important thing, and if you have a good microphone, it's going to sound good when it gets to that level. The medium to which you record is secondary to the microphone. So the distribution, we've decided not to go through the brick and mortar distribution system. Kind of feel it's broken. It's Tower Records is having a hard time paying the record companies. It's not working. So now we go through the internet. We sell it on McGuinn.com and Amazon.com and at concert venues. And our limited edition CD has done very well doing that. So we're really happy with the way it's gone.